Hello guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this tutorial, we are going to be building a simple task management application wherein the main feature here is going to be the drag and drop functionality for this task. So the first thing is going to be our ordering and our reordering functionality, and lastly we're going to have that possibility to drag items in between the list, drag items from one list to the other. And this is it. So and just one restriction here, which is going to be in case the user tries to drop an item out of the list, it should bring it back to its initial position without really altering anything. So if I try dropping it outside, I should get it back to where it was, but if I drop here, it should drop. Alright guys, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that right now, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and probably share with your friends. And for comments, guys, feel free to ask me any question in the comment section. I will answer to the ones I can, and anyone that I can't answer, I might give you reference to where you can find a solution. And then I'm also open for any discussions regarding maybe possible improvements to this mini application, or maybe if you have any feedback, I would be very grateful to receive, and any suggestions will be highly welcomed. Alright guys, let's get into our code and start building this fantastic to-do list application, or let's just call it a task management application. Okay guys, we are going to be using Next.js, so in that case we should use npx create next app, and we're going to call it React-dnd example. Okay, let's wait for create next app to configure our next application for us. In the meantime, let's just pause the video and come back when it's done. Okay, so it's done installing all dependencies, so let's just open that and open it within our code editor. Alright, so we're going to do let's just first of all run our application. It's yarn dev. Then we're going to open it within our browser. Okay, this is our next application. So let's go into our Chakra UI documentation and then search for areas where maybe search for how Next.js has been configured with Chakra UI. Okay, so the first step is to create our Next.js application, which we've done, and then the second step is to now install Chakra UI dependencies. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to open the terminal or editor's terminal and install the packages. Alright guys, let's wait for this to get installed. Okay, our Chakra UI dependencies are installed, and let's now go ahead and add our Google font. The font, okay, this is the font we're going to be using within the application, and to add that we need a documents page. So let's go ahead and create document.js page, and within this page what we're going to do, I'm just going to turn this into a class component instead of functional component, and it's just going to be without any name. Anyways, let's do it with functional component, and I'm going to do export. Okay. No guys, let's use a class component instead, because we need to extend it to document. We call it my document, extends document, and this document comes from next document. So let's make sure it's imported. Okay, and now within our document, render function, and a render function returns HTML from document. Let's give a language of English, and a head. Within the head, we're going to now paste our font family and links. So this is where you can get this link here. You can just come here. I'm going to use pop-ins for my font family. So you can choose whichever font family you would like to use. Now let's also add the body. And within our body, we need two components. We need to render two components. The first is the main component, which I think represents our main. It's more like a parent represents our main application, I can say. So this is just the main application. And then we have next script. This is to render Next.js scripts. Well guys, I don't understand all of these two components very well, but feel free to check them up in the Next.js documentation. Okay, we are done with the font. We're setting up the font. Let's now go into our styles. We don't need the styles anymore because we are going to be using Chakra. And then let's create a source folder. Within our source folder, and let's go into pages and just remove all of this because we don't need them. I'm just going to call it app for now. I just like to make sure that there is React is imported here. Now we have that. Let's this is going to be our home, and what we need what we need next is the theme, which is this, and within our theme we need colors, an object, and I'm just going to quickly paste the colors we need for this our theme. And by the way, I'm just going to paste the entire theme directory, the entire theme file, and I'm going to quickly explain everything there. So here, this is our theme. We're importing extend theme from Chakra React and Chakra's theme. Now we've defined our colors here, and we've also defined our fonts. The body and the head should both have the same fonts. Then for extended theme, this is how we declare our theme. We've declared and exported the theme at once. So we are spreading the Chakra theme, even though we are not going to use it, but I just thought I should spread it there since it's the theme, since we are defining a theme. So these are the most important thing here. You can still do without this theme, but this one, it's a must. Now the next step, and I think this is the last step for the Chakra UI config. So we are going to import Chakra provider, and this Chakra provider expects a theme prop, which in this case is going to be our theme. Let's make sure that this theme is imported. And let's go ahead and check our application. Okay, seems like we've imported. Within our home, let's move that. Head is not defined. Make sure we've defined it. Still nothing. Head should come from React. Should come from React documents. Styles is not defined as well. Let's go into this here. And I think our application works just fine. Okay. Now that we have all of this set up, our React Next.js application is configured, and it's configured with our Chakra UI framework or style library. So the next thing we need to do is to design our page and give it all the stylings that we can. So the first thing, that's within our index page, we're going to use the flex, and this flex, I'm just going to give a flex direction of column. Now main BG comes from our theme, so we have here main BG. So this is just the main background, which is dark. I'm going to give a minimum height of 100 view height, and I'm just going to give a width of 4. Should occupy the 100%. It should occupy the entire width. And then let's give a color, default color for our text, white text. This also comes from our theme here. And what else? Lastly, I'm just going to give a padding bottom of 2 rems. Let's see what we have. Cool. So this is okay. Now let's also define the header. Forums, column, align item center. Then heading, we need font size to be 3 times extra large, and font weight, I want it to be 600. That's bold. Now let's give the lower part of our header so we're going to import text. Text should have a font size of 20 pixels, font weight 600 as well, and color should be subtle white, subtle text. And I'm just going to give React Beautiful. Let's see what we have. Cool. Now we have our header, the page header. Let's now define the body of our page. I'm going to justify content space between. So this is the component that houses the columns. 4 pixels, 4 rems rather. And now let's also we need to define our column. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a static columns for now, and later refactor. So we have flex. We're going to give it rounded 3 pixels. column BG background 400 pixels, weight 620 pixels for height, and should be a flex that it should be a column flex direction. Now within this column, let's now give the header of the column. The header text within the header. .7 pixels. And here I'm going to align item center, height of 60 pixels. Rounded 30 pixels. Okay, we've defined the column and it now has its heading as well. The next thing we need to do is the body, where alt has been rendered. Let's go there. So we have here, this is our column, and just beneath the header we're going to have another flex, and this flex is going to have a pixel padding side by side of 1.5 rem. I'm going to give it a flex of 1 so that it should always expand and occupy the spaces evenly. Then we have flex direction column, and then that is it. Now let's also define, let's also style our task cards. So we're going to have a flex as well. This flex should have margin bottom of 1 rem, so the spaces between the tasks should be 1 rem, a height of 72 pixels, and background card BG. We have rounded, it should be rounded by 3 pixels, and padding should be 1 pixel up on top and bottom, then 1.5 pixels for top and bottom padding, and side by side. So we have our card, and within our card we're going to have a text. Well, we can do without the text, but I'm just going to have a text, and let's just say hola, or just say hey there. Okay, this is our task. So the most important UIs are created, so we need to now do some refactoring and integrate our drag and drop package. So let's go inside our source, and we're going to have a column file, and this column file we are now going to copy the column we've defined here, this column that we've designed here, and just paste it there. First of all, let's import it, and within our column here we have this, make sure that we've imported the flex and the text components from Chakra. Okay, nothing has changed, and let's just, all right, that's cool. Now next thing is the last part is now going to be for us to integrate our package for drag and drop. So let's go now and install using yarn add React beautiful. Let's install the React drag and drop package and start setting up for drag and drop feature. Within our home component, we're going to need the drag drop context from React-DND, React-beautiful-dnd, and to make sure that this component is wrapped by the context. Now that we have this component expects on drag end function, and I'm going to define that handler the same name. This on drag expects a result, and result here has destination, which is the destination for the drag and drop, has the source, which is where the drag starts, and we're going to need both of them within our application here. Okay, so next thing is going to be for us to define our data. Let's just create a data which we will be using for this application, and I'm just going to copy this and paste. I'm just going to paste it here, and we will go over it. So this is the data. So we have this data. I'm calling it initial data. This is the initial state for our task. We have the task. We have a hash map for task, and each ID is mapped to its task here in this format. And then we also have a hash map for the column, where each column ID is mapped to that specific column, and each column has a list of task IDs that belong to it. Lastly, we have the column order. This represents the order in which the columns appear on your screen. So we are going to be using this information to represent data on our UI. Okay, next step is to define the state. So we're going to have view state, and this has a state. This state takes an initial data as its initial state, making sure it's imported. Next is we're going to use this state to render the task within the columns. So I'm going to have state.column order, and I'm mapping through the column order we have column. Within the state, I'm going to get the column by the column column ID. Remember, this is the reason why we have it in this format. We have columns mapped to their column ID. So I'm going within those columns, and I'm getting the specific column by the ID here, and I'm also going to get the task for that column. So we have this column task IDs, and then I'm going to map through those task IDs, and I'm going to get the state task by the task ID. Now the last step is to return our column. And this column needs to have a key, which is the column ID, and the column like that, and its task. Make sure that this is removed. Okay, we still have our columns aligned in that format. Now the difference here is this has been rendered from the number of columns available here. So let's now get into our column components and make use of this data that has been sent as prop, not as prop. So we have here column and tasks. We're expecting column and tasks from within the as props. Column title, that's updated, and for the tasks we are going to do a mapping. Have your task.map, and I'm going to copy this. Then I'm going to task.content. Great, we now have our tasks, and okay, the last thing, we have one last thing to do, which is we've already defined our context. We've already wrapped the main component with the context. Let's now add the droppable and draggable components to the application. So for now, let's go into our column, and within our column we have we're going to wrap the container that holds the task with the droppable component coming from React-beautiful-dnd. Now this droppable component expects a droppable ID, and this ID is going to be our column ID. Next, this droppable has a syntax by which it's expecting its children to be rendered. So we have here a droppable provided, then we have its snapshot. Let's just render them here. Now we have in here this. Now we need to add the droppable inner ref. As a prop to this component, to this container task, the container that wraps that holds all the tasks, or let's just say where we want to be able to drop items. We need to add a ref to it, and also we have to spread the droppable provided droppable props. Cool. At this point, we won't be able to drag and drop yet unless we've added a draggable component around the task. So let's go ahead. Within our tasks, we need to wrap the task with a draggable component, and this draggable component needs a key since it's within a map, and then it also expects a draggable ID just like the droppable, and this ID should be a string, but our task IDs are all numbers, so let's make sure we are passing a string. Lastly, it expects an index, and in this case let's just give it the index from the map function. So this is it, and it's going to follow the same syntax as the droppable, sorry, with the provided and the First thing, the key, we need to pass a key. This key is going to be your task ID. So we can now take it off from here and have it here instead. And then, actually we don't need it here. So, and then another thing we need to add is the properties for our draggable. First property, we need to first let's give it the ref draggables inner ref. Next, we need to spread the draggable props. Lastly, handle props. Okay, so we need these three parameters within as properties to these container, to this task for it to be able to, for us to be able to drag and drop it wherever we want. Okay, now we have this. Let's see if we are able to drag. No, we are not. Let's see what error. Okay, so this is a problem I think many people will face, and a quick solution for this is because we are having this because we create React. We are having this because Next.js renders on the server, does server-side rendering by default, and we are importing. In here, we need to implement dynamic import for this column component that uses the draggable and droppable components. So to solve this issue, we need to import this using dynamic import. And I'm assuming that this should solve a problem. Okay, we have one issue. This is not enough. We need to disable server-side rendering for this component. Let's see. Great, our errors are gone. Let's see, now we are able to drag and drop items. So notice that we are able to drag, but it doesn't stick at the position where we drop it. So when we drop it, it switches and goes back to where it was, and that's because we've not written the code that reorders positions. So that is what we need to do next. Let's go within our index file and add some code within the onDragEnd function. So a few steps that we need to follow here, 3 steps. The first is to check if user tries to drop in an unknown destination. We have a if statement for that. Let's just do the next. Next is if user drops within the same if the user's destination is equals to, if the drop destination is equal to the source destination, if drop destination is equal to the source. Not really. So what I mean here is if the user drags and drops back in the same position. Yeah, if the user drags and drops back in this same position. Lastly, if this is not lastly, actually this is the third point, which is if the user drops within the same column but in a different position. And the last point is if the user drops out of the same, like moves from one list to another. Okay, dropping outside dropping within an unknown destination is forbidden. So we're going to check if the destination is undefined, like just return void. So if you're dropping somewhere that doesn't contain the droppable, isn't wrapped by the droppable component, then the destination is going to be undefined, so we should return null. Next is if we are going to check if the destination, if the droppable ID is equal to the source, if the destination's droppable ID is equal to the source's droppable ID, and if the destination's position or index is equal to the source's index, then just return null or void. It should return void if that's the case. So third to the last, or second to the last, is we're going to do a check if the sources column. So I'm going to define two columns here. We have the sources column, the source column, which is gotten from the state column using the source droppable ID, and the destination column gotten from the state using destination droppable ID. And our if statement now is going to do a check for source column. If the source column ID, which is the column, the first column, if this equals to destination column's ID, then we should reorder the list, and we're going to define a function that is going to return a new column, reorder the list and return a new column. This function takes three parameters: the source column, the source index, which is our start index, and the destination's index, the end, which is the end index in this case. And with this new column, we're going to update our state. So let's just create a new state here. New state. This new state is going to spread the old state and update the columns. State columns, spreading the columns, and new column ID. We're updating the column by that new column's ID. Then set our state, a new state. Now we have, this is the, after that, let's return void. Now this is just to break the execution here, just to end the execution here. Because if the user is reordering, then it means he's not dropping outside a column. He's just dropping within the same column. So by the end of this computation, or this calculation here, we should end that execution. Let's get at the top now. Let's define our reorder list column list function, and we expecting the source column, the start index, and the end index. Okay, a few things we need to do here. First is to create a new task ID. We need to get all the list of all the tasks. So we're going to create a new task ID, list of task IDs, and we are doing that from the source columns task IDs. And then we're going to remove, let me just explain. So we are going to use the slice function, and we will go through the new task IDs and use the slice function to remove an item from the start position. So we're going to remove an item, that is one item, from the start index. So where you're starting the drag, we're going to remove that item from that start index within the array. And 1 here represents the number of items we are removing. So we're removing 1 from the start index. And this splice function normally returns the item you've removed, or the list of items you've removed. So in this case, it's just 1. I'm just going to call it removed. And then I'm going to have another new splice function within that loops through the new task IDs. But in this time, we are getting the item at the end index. We are not deleting any item. So 0 means we are not removing any item at that end index. And removed, we are now adding this item at the end index. So what we've done here is we've gone through the start index, we've taken the item at the start position, then we've gone through the task IDs array, we've taken the item, we've removed one item at the start index, then we've gone through that task IDs array again, we've added back the removed item from the start index to the end index. Lastly, we need to define a new column and update and provide all the data. Spread source column here and update the task IDs, the new task IDs. Last, we return new column, which is what we are expecting here. Alright guys, we are done with the reordering part of the application. Let's test it out. Okay, we have an error. Let's refresh. Okay, the error is gone. Now, remember, we already had a drag and drop. So let's notice this is the position for this create page layout. Let's drag it to a different position, and that stays. So our reordering functionality is working. The next and last thing we need to do is to work on the ability to drop outside of that column. So let's do that now, which is this. Alright, so if the user moves from one column to another, we need to also update the state for that. So we're going to do in this case we don't need to do any if statement, because the first few if statements we can only get to this point if none of these if statements are true. So let's just go ahead and implement the code for moving from one list to another. So within this we're going to create a start index or start task ID. This is a start columns task IDs, and we're going to create it from the destination columns task IDs, not destination, but the source column, sorry. And then I'm going to also remove a task ID from the start task ID. Task IDs array, and we get to get it from the source index. And then now that we've removed it, we have to define a new start, which is going to spread the source column and the task IDs for that source column. Then next thing is to create an end task IDs from the destination columns task IDs. And we are going to remove, actually not remove, we're going to replace that destination. We're going to replace, we're just going, not replace, but we are going to insert, I'm going to insert the remove task ID from the start task IDs array within this end task IDs array. Now that this is done, let's just create a new end task column, or end column, new end column, and this is also going to spread the destination column. Then we have the task IDs for that destination column. Which are the end task IDs. Now, another thing we need to do is to now update our state, which is, I think this is the last thing we need to do. New state, spread the old state just like we did in the previous parts. Then update our columns. First of all, update, spread the old columns, and the two columns, which are the new start column and new end column. Last thing, set state, and that should do the magic for us. So guys, this should now permit us to be able to drag in between the columns, and this is it, and it works. Now just a few finishing touches to our drag and drop application. I'm going to add a few styling to the state, to these cards as you drag. So let's go back into our columns, and on these tasks, a few things we need to add is the outline. Notice the border lines you see. Wait, I just want to make it look a bit nicer, so let's add an outline and give it outline color. This outline color, it's going to come I'm going to use this draggable snapshot. We're going to get the is dragging property from the draggable snapshot, and we will be applying an outline color when the card is being dragged. So there is a color within our theme called card border, and if it is not dragging, just make it transparent, so it will seem as if there is no color, no border at all. And then what next? I think this should work for us. We now have a last thing. Let's just add a slight border, a slight box shadow. Same thing. We're going to conditionally apply this shadow with this is draggable, and there you have it. So you're applying this box shadow when you're dragging, and if you're not dragging, it should be on set. Let's test that out. So we have a slight box shadow. Okay, all right guys, this is the end of our tutorial, and don't forget to smash the like button. If you have any feedback to give, you can just drop it down in the comment section. If you like this video, let me know. If you don't like it, just let me know. And for any I'll be very happy to receive any suggestions for future tutorials. So guys, subscribe and stay up to date with the latest videos I'll be uploading, because more interesting tutorials will be coming up as the days go by. Alright guys, thank you for watching, and see you in the next tutorial.